But I am very sincere in expressing our gratitude to Ambassador Yun. Also, NCNK is a facilitator of information sharing among U.S. Track 2 hosts who engage with the North Koreans. And finally, I would just say that our members, in addition to what I've already shared related to present activities, our members, present and future, will be primed to engage with North Korea on multiple fronts once it is possible to do so. And that includes scientific, agricultural, medical, and so on. I would like, by the way, to thank the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, their staff. I'd also like to thank my colleagues from NCNK for their assistance in preparing for today. But especially I want to thank all of you for coming. It is quite an honor for us to host Dr. Chung-in Moon and Dr. John Linton. And I am also quite pleased to introduce Frank Aum, who agreed to serve as moderator today. Frank serves as the senior expert on North Korea at the U.S. Institute of Peace. He joined USIP from the U.S. Korea Institute at Johns Hopkins University's School of Advanced International Studies, where he was a visiting scholar. From 2010 to 2017, Mr. Aum served as the senior advisor for North Korea in the Office of the Secretary of Defense. During this time, he advised 4 secretaries on issues related to Northeast Asia and the Korean Peninsula, and he received the Secretary of Defense Medal for Outstanding Public Service. Frank has a number of other professional accomplishments. I would just conclude his introduction by saying that he received his BA from Dartmouth College, his MPP from Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government, and his JD from the University of California, Berkeley. Frank will now introduce our presenters, and he will outline the ground rules for this afternoon's presentation and your participation. Thank you so much for coming. Frank?
Thank you very much, Keith, and welcome everyone to this event. I think this forum is very timely given everything that's going on in the peninsula. I think there's been a lot of twists and turns, but to sort of boil it down, I'll say the latest situation is this. The Olympic truce has provided a period of respite from the provocations and the sharp rhetoric from last fall. And now it appears that both the United States and North Korea are willing to engage, or they express some willingness to engage in preliminary talks. But there's a couple questions that remain. First is the U.S.-South Korea joint military exercises. They're scheduled to resume in April. We need to see whether they'll resume, whether they'll be modified or suspended to allow the period of peace to continue. And then the second issue is, can those preliminary talks develop into actual negotiations? The United States seems to be saying no as long as North Korea continues to insist that its nuclear weapons will not be on the table. And then the other security issue that doesn't get nearly attention that it deserves is the human security issue. North Korea is in the middle of a deep, prolonged humanitarian crisis. A recent UN report said that 18 million out of 25 million North Koreans face chronic food insecurity, 10.5 million are undernourished, and 3.5 million have little or no access to safe water, hygiene, and sanitation. And then on top of this, the international sanctions are starting to take effect. More and more donor countries are stopping their aid to North Korea, and a lot of NGOs are having difficulties conducting business in this environment. Fortunately, today we have 2 South Koreans who are experts on what's happening on the ground on the peninsula. And I'll also add that they are 2 true humanitarians who have a deep love for the Korean people. First is Dr. Moon Chung-in, who is a distinguished professor at Yonsei University. He also wanted me to plug that he's the editor-in-chief of Global Asia. He's a senior advisor for South Korean President Moon Jae-in, one of the original architects of the Sunshine Policy, so of course an advisor to Kim Dae-jung and Roh Moo-hyun as well. And then our second speaker is Dr. John Linton, or as he's known in Korea, In Yo-han. He is director of the Severance Hospital International Healthcare Center at Yonsei University. Of course, as you all know, the Linton family has done tremendous missionary work for over a century in South Korea. And then Dr. Linton and his brother Stephen, through the Eugene Bell Foundation, has made many trips to North Korea to do medical humanitarian assistance work, particularly related to tuberculosis. So we did a little bit of an audible here, and we decided that we're going to separate the speakers. So Dr. Moon will speak first for about 15, 20 minutes, and then he'll take questions, and then we'll go to Dr. Linton, and then he'll take questions as well. So with that set up, Dr. Moon, please.
Thank you for your kind introduction, Frank. And where's Keith? And I thank Keith for arranging this wonderful event. And I missed, Jae-in. I thought that he's coming today. He was on the list. I think he must sign up. He must have signed up, before he announced his resignation. Anyhow, the situation of the Korean Peninsula is quite, changing. Now, our President Moon Jae-in's modest dream modest hope was to have a successful and peaceful Pyeongchang Olympic. Yes, he delivered it. He had a peaceful Pyeongchang Winter Olympic. Now, his task is to how to transform peaceful Pyeongchang Olympic into a lasting Olympic peace. What is meant by that? He wanted to expand exchange and cooperation with North Korea. He wanted to build confidence building with North Korea. He hoped that there would be a resumption of US-DPRK bilateral talks, and ultimately he hoped that there would be breakthrough to the stirred North Korean nuclear problem on the occasion of Pyeongchang Olympic. But he is facing a lot of challenges and hurdles. But let me just briefly overview his policy. He was inaugurated May 9th last year, but he was bombarded by North Korea. North Korea test-fired 11 ballistic missiles, and also it undertook 6 nuclear testing with a destructive power of 100 kilotons, over 100 kilotons. It's quite, it was, really President Moon was very angry about North Korea because he really wanted to have a talk with North Korea. Even before we have any meaningful talks, North Korea was engaging in that kind of provocative behavior. Therefore, he was very, very, very angry. That's why he allowed the deployment of, THAAD, and also he decided to increase defense budget and all these kinds of things. At the same time, the United States was sending very chilling message to North Korea. We had the crisis of April last year, crisis of August, crisis of October. Now some people are talking about coming crisis in April. Therefore, there was a continuation of crisis on the Korean Peninsula. Therefore, he was very much wary of American action against North Korea because, National Security Advisor McMaster was talking about preventive war on North Korea, and all the Washington pundits were talking about preemptive, strike on North Korea. Therefore, there's every reason he was concerned about it. And then when he decided to allow the deployment of American THAAD in South Korea, then China protested vehemently, and South Korea was sandwiched between Beijing and Washington. More than that, domestic politics in South Korea was extremely polarized over the issue of how to deal with North Korea. Okay? And the divide between progressive and conservative has been wide and deep. Therefore, he studied his government with this kind of very unfriendly internal and external milieu. But his goal has been always simple and straightforward. His goal is to create nuclear weapons-free, peaceful Korean Peninsula. And in pursuing that goal, he set the 3 major principles. First principle is the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Second principle is the primacy of peace. No war on the Korean Peninsula. Peace is the most important asset. And he even argued that peace without unification, unification without peace is not true unification. There got to be peace first, then unification. And third principle is that he made it very clear that he would not pursue unilateral policy on North Korea. He will seek national consensus. And also will go through the international collaboration, particularly with the United States. Those are 3 major principles. And then he laid out the 4 strategies. First 2 strategies are very much reactive. North Korea provoked by test launching ballistic missiles and undertaking underground nuclear testing. That is violation of United Nations Security Council resolutions. Therefore, he had to take sanctions and pressures on North Korea. He have gone in tandem with the United States with regard to sanctions and maximum pressures. He complied with the Security Council resolutions 100%, and he cooperated with the United States on the American unilateral sanctions on North Korea, including secondary boycott. But at the same time, because he was feeling the military threat coming from North Korea, therefore he paid attention to military deterrence and missile defense. Military deterrence is composed of conventional deterrence and nuclear deterrence. Conventional deterrence was based on the strengthening of ROK-US combined forces, as well as strengthening of South Korea's independent defense capabilities. As to nuclear deterrence, yes, we relied on extended deterrence doctrine of the United States, and he was more than willing to accommodate American nuclear umbrella in dealing with North Korean nuclear. Therefore, he was very clear and very, very active in pursuing missile defense too. Okay? He decided to upgrade the PAC-2 system into the PAC-3 system and allow the deployment of American THAAD in South Korea. And he has decided to expedite the procurement of F-13 stealth fighter. And also he has been expediting the acquisition of Global Hawks. And also we are about to start launch major satellite and intelligence satellite. We need at least 5 to 6 intelligence satellite in order to sustain Korean version of missile defense system, KAMD. Okay. Therefore, he was very, very faithful to the very traditional, deterrence logic. But he wanted to go beyond that one. That is a third strategy, that is dialogue and negotiation. He wanted to have an inter-Korean dialogue. He wanted to have a DPRK-US bilateral dialogue. And he believes in the utility of six-party talk framework too. Therefore, he hopes that kinds of bilateral talks would lead to the reactivation of six-party talk processes. And finally, he hates to be accused of being subject to Korea passing. Okay? DPRK US passing South Korea, US China passing South Korea. We South Koreans hate that Korean passing syndrome. Therefore, in order to avoid and overcome the Korea passing, he wanted to take a more leading and proactive role. In fact, on the occasion of Pyeongchang Winter Olympic, he showed that he can play a role of leading and proactive, actions in bringing North Korea and the United States together. But in pursuing those 4 strategies, he also made it very clear that he will apply the 3 operational principles that involve 3 no's. First, no nuclear weapons, no nukes. Therefore, he strongly opposed the independent pursuit of nuclear weapons in South Korea, and he opposes retransfer of American tactical nuclear weapons to South Korea. His nuclear policy is completely congruent with American government policy. At the same time, he strongly opposed any military action, unilateral military action, by any country. On the occasion of National Independence Day, on August 15 last year, he made it very clear, we do not want no more war in the Korean Peninsula. And he would not tolerate any unilateral military action without prior consultation and consensus with South Korea. He repeated that position very clearly. And third operational principle is no regime change, no unification by absorption or Korean unification in South Korean terms. Those 2 have been the backbone of our past government policies on North Korea. Therefore, when he gave a speech in Berlin on July 6th last year, he made it very clear. Okay? We do not seek regime change in North Korea. We do not seek unification in South Korean terms. We want exchanging cooperation with North Korea. We wanted to do easy thing first, difficult thing later. Of course, North Korea didn't respond, but however, he wanted to really get rid of any kinds of hostility between North and South Korea so that North and South Korea can have a genuine dialogue and confidence buildings. But knowingly or unknowingly, he has been pursuing these strategies under those kinds of fundamental principles as well as operational principles. What has been his performance so far up until last year, until the end of December? Prospect was a gleam, somber. North Korea was not responding to us. But after Kim Jong-un's New Year's speech, North Korea began to change. They resumed the military hotline in West Sea. They again reoperated the Panmunjom liaison office, and they were getting our phone calls. Okay, there was a complete restoration of channels of communication between North and South. Okay, and also, as you all know, the North Korea sent Kim Young-nam, chairman of Standing Committee of Supreme People's Assembly, and Kim Yo-jong, sister of Kim Jong-un, to South Korea during the opening ceremony. And North Korea sent Kim Young-chul, the head of Department of United Front of Korea Workers' Party, as well as the vice chairman of Central Committee of Korea Workers' Party, to our closing ceremony of Pyeongchang Olympic. And obviously, you can clearly see North Korea should have sent Kim Young-nam and Kim Yo-jong to have some kind of contact with American delegate. And also they sent Kim Young-chul at the closing ceremony, to have a meaningful talk with South Korea. It was very well, calculated in the move by North Korea. President Moon working very, very hard, and he really treated North Koreans really authentic and sincere attitude. And I think they should have sent some message to North Korea. North Korea has shown unprecedentedly, friendly behavior toward South Korea. Okay? Even when in fact, when President Moon met Kim Young-nam and Kim Yo-jong, he didn't mention the nuclear issues up front, but he used the term without resolving fundamental issues. Okay? There would not be real progress in inter-Korean talks. He touched on it. But during the Kim Young-chul, he's a key guy in charge of inter-Korean relations. President Moon, Ambassador Chung-in, our national security advisor, and so on, head of our intelligence, they all met, had a lunch or dinner with Kim Young-chul, and made it very clear, you got to make progress in nuclear issue. Denuclearization should be the goal. In the past, North Korea would have just jumped out. They would even, they wouldn't even discuss about nuclear issue. They have always been arguing nuclear issues between North Korea and the US, not between North and South Korea. But this time, Kim Young-chul listened to our proposals and ideas and etc. The positive one. But it's really, I think it is time for maximum prudence. Okay? Maximum pressure is important, but maximum prudence is very, very important for us. Because now it's like walking on ice. We do not know which way the situation would evolve into. Okay? But President Moon is really working very hard to persuade North Korea to come up with a more sincere dialogue with the United States. Also, our government has been really persuading the United States to low threshold of having dialogue with North Korea. But in April, as Frank pointed out, Seoul and Washington will be resuming its annual joint military exercise, Key Resolve, which was delayed from the last December. And we may resume the allocated US joint military training, Foul Eagle. And if you look at the North Korean mass media, North Korea has been really saying that if South Korea resume military exercise and training with the United States, then everything will return to the original position. Okay. Therefore, now situation is very, precarious. We do not know which way to go. But Personally, I would argue that since I'm not speaking for the government, since I'm speaking for myself, but I really hope that the American government will take a more, forthcoming, behavior vis-a-vis North Korea, and I hope that the United States, should be aware that North Korean nuclear problem cannot be solved quickly. Quick fix solution would not work. It would take a medium to long-term, time perspective to solve the problem. And also, yes, we know that North Korea has been demonic, but we should not demonize North Korea. If North Korea becomes real demon, then demons does not compromise. Therefore, we need to, have some different approach to North Korea. And third, we need to be more realistic and flexible. Realistic means what? North Korea has nuclear weapons from technical point of view. But you can ask North Korea to denuclearize first, then we'll have a talk with you. That logic wouldn't work. And also, if we say North Koreans that, okay, you accommodate what we demand, then we'll think about giving incentives. But that won't, either. Okay? Therefore, in other words, there got to be more flexible attitude, on North Korea. We should come with all the possible options on the table, okay? Including, diplomatic normalization between the U.S. and North Korea, okay? Even, for example, some kinds of joint project of a rocket launching with North Korea. That may sound crazy, but we need some kind of imagination in dealing with North Korea. And also, it is very important for us to prioritize agenda. Okay, yes, North Korea has become source of all kinds of problems: nuclear, human rights and democracy, cyber security issues, and even biochemical weapons. There are myriad issues with regard to North Korea, but you cannot resolve all the problems simultaneously. Therefore, now I would say that we focus on nuclear issues. But if you put the human rights and democracy issues together along with the nuclear issues, then North Korea will regard it as a hostile act by the United States. Then they will never make concession on the nuclear issue. Therefore, I personally argue that there needs to be prioritization of agenda in dealing with North Korea. And anyhow, finally, I want to seek your advice, what our government should do, okay? And we want America to be more flexible in dealing with North Korea. Apparently, it seems to be listening to us, okay? But we're sure, okay? But under this situation, I don't know what kinds of actions should our government take. Which is my own question. I will conclude my talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moon. We'll go to questions now for Dr. Moon. Just please raise your hand and provide your name and affiliation. And I will ask the first question and to give you guys a chance to think of a question. So Dr. Moon, to me it seemed like the fundamental issue is that both sides, US and North Korea, have staked out these maximalist positions, right? So zero sum, no room for compromise. At the same time, President Moon has asked for flexibility. He wants the US to maybe drop preconditions. He's asked North Korea to recommit to denuclearization. How likely is that flexibility on both sides? And if it doesn't happen, what are we looking at in the next several months?
Very difficult to answer, but I'm an optimist. Therefore, I would believe that both North Korea and the United States will make some kinds of compromise. That's my answer to your question. If you work on the assumption of inflexibility on both sides, therefore, no way forward. Therefore, I would say that I'm somewhat cautiously optimistic that the U.S. and North Korea will eventually talk in the near future.
Okay. Questions? Right here.
Hi, I'm Dan Segalin from the PBS NewsHour. I'd like to ask you about the upcoming military exercises. What should become of them? Should they be postponed? Should they be delayed? Should they be scaled back?
It is my understanding that ROK US have decided to resume joint military exercise in the first week of April. That is my understanding. Okay? And there was some media report on that one. Therefore, I think it would be extremely difficult to delay or cancel the joint exercise. But if there is a talk between the US and North Korea before that exercise, then there could be some kinds of compromise, you know. Therefore, I'm personally hoping that there would be resumption of talks between the US and North Korea before the resumption of joint military exercise.
My understanding is that there was an announcement by the South Korean government saying that they are going to resume Key Resolve and UFG, which are the two computer-assisted exercises, but there was no mention of full legal, which is the field training exercise, and that's the one that sometimes tends to irritate North Korea. So there's some speculation about whether the omission of that means that there's some discussion of that particular exercise. I'm not going to put you on the spot to see if you know anything more about that, but that's something that I think people are looking to as well. Stanley, do you have a question?
Thank you for this extraordinary opportunity, Dr. Moon, and for your presentation. But unlike you, I'm cautiously pessimistic. And I'm cautiously pessimistic not only because of history, of all the failed attempts in the past, but because I am very worried about a scenario where the DPRK-ROK process moves ahead of the US DPRK process. So my question to you is, can you see any scenario in which North Korea agrees to a roadmap that at the end has denuclearization, which is the only way I can see the U.S. willingness to enter into those negotiations? And if not, how does the ROK manage, in a sense, the trap of negotiating with the North, being asked to provide benefits, economic in particular, when there is no U.S. DPRK trap?
That's a good question. In fact, it is my understanding the North Korean delegates were briefed about our tentative roadmap. But roadmap will be jointly drawn particularly between the US and South Korea. And it is my understanding that US and South Korea are now working on those comprehensive roadmap. I don't know what would be North Korean response, but I think that if the US and South Korea can come up with some kinds of comprehensive joint roadmap with reasonable incentives, maybe we may be able to persuade North Korea. But here, vital thing is ROK US cooperation, the transparency between the two. And to my understanding, the South Korea has been keeping the 100% transparency with regard to North Korea to American policymakers. Therefore, I don't see any problem. But anyhow, and also, even summit talk without full consultation with the United States, South Korea may not go for the summit talk, unilaterally. Therefore, ROK US, cooperation and coordination is vital in fostering inter-Korean dialogue.
Bill.
Yes, nice to meet you again. So happy to talk in your class years ago, Yonsei. Yes, yesterday China Customs announced Chinese imports from North Korea were down 85% from January 2017, similar to data from December. We have 2-3 months here with almost no North Korean exports to North Korea. Big part of this is textiles. China has stopped importing North Korean textiles. Must be, you would think, devastating to the North Korean textile industry. You didn't mention the sanctions, especially the Chinese sanctions. Do you think these are beginning to work? Are they beginning to influence North Korea? Or do you think, how long do you think they will be able to last?
I'm not expert on that issue, but most of experts argue that within coming year, the impact will be less visible, but within 2 to 3 years time framework, the sanction will be very, very visible. But still, North Korea can endure outside sanctions. There is a very paradoxical observation. Yes, there will be an impact on the North Korean economy, yet North Korea will endure external sanctions no matter how hard it is. Therefore, even experts are giving paradoxical conclusions.
Hi, I'm Jiwon Yang from Stimson Center, and I have a question about the prioritized agenda of denuclearization, because I think sometimes we need to prioritize some agendas, like everything is important, such as like denuclearization or OPCON or like HR issues of North, but sometimes from time to time we need to prioritize an agenda, and I think the common interest of US-ROK would be denuclearization for now. So I have a question about, do you think we can handle OPCON issue as a sovereignty problem later, or should we handle for now? Do you have some ideas about this? Thank you.
OPCON is not in, that is between the US and South Korea, and all other issues about North Korea. Therefore, OPCON issue is somewhat irrelevant of, inter-Korean, talks or other nuclear, North Korean nuclear issue. Therefore, OPCON issue will be, pursued, But again, there are many, barriers and inertia. Therefore, it is not easy to, implement the retransfer of operational, wartime operational control. But our government will continue.
Just as a follow-on onto that, do you think that to avoid the Korea passing that South Korea is very averse to, that by assuming operational control in 2021, 22 as planned, that will help South Korea assume a more prominent position because now that when they're in the lead at that point, they'll be in a better position to deal directly with North Korea. Do you think that may be a possibility?
Yeah, in the past, we thought in that way. In other words, if you have a retransfer of wartime operational control to South Korea, then we can take a more independent action against North Korea. If North Korea provoke in West Sea and elsewhere, we can make immediate retaliatory measures. That was one of the motives why former President Roh Moo-hyun was preoccupied with the transfer of wartime operational control. But now there's a nuclear dimension. Therefore, in other words, retransfer of wartime operational control alone cannot really control or contain North Korean military provocation. That is why there's a need for further strengthening of alliance with the United States, because we are under American nuclear protection, without which you would have a very weak bargaining position vis-a-vis North Korea. It is again paradoxical.
Andrew.
Hi, Andrew Yo, Catholic University. Welcome back, Dr. Moon, to Washington, D.C. The title of this talk is Balancing Security, Humanitarian, and Human Rights, and I thought I might try to bring in some of the other points of discussion here. I mean, I know the government, South Korean government, is keen in providing humanitarian assistance. They had made gestures at the very beginning of President Moon's tenure. But in terms of human rights, I mean, here in the United States, we've been hearing more about North Korean, the Trump administration has brought in North Korean human rights again. I was wondering where President Moon stands on this issue, because there always tends to be a concern where when we begin negotiating with North Korea, when we enter dialogue with North Korea on security issues, you tend to push aside human rights because you don't want to, you want to have forward progress, but I'm wondering where the current South Korean government might stand on human rights issues.
Now we have a North Korean human rights law, and President Moon is a lawyer, and he will comply with the law. Okay, but actual implementation of law is a function of what is going on in the National Assembly. Okay, but he's more interested in the basic human needs issues in North Korea. Therefore, he would like to pursue both in human rights and basic human needs, but he'll be more paying attention to basic human needs. The humanitarian assistance really involve basic human needs issues, but human rights issues is not easy. You cannot achieve human rights issues from outside. Okay, pressure alone. There should be internal changes. It takes much longer time. Therefore, you can use the slogans. You can come up with a megaphone diplomacy on human rights issues, but actual progress has been very, very, sluggish. Therefore, I would say that he would pay attention to human rights conditions in North Korea. He would be much more outspoken compared with President Kim Dae-jung and President Roh Moo-hyun. but he would give a more emphasis on humanitarian assistance to North Korea. Okay.
Colonel Minnick.
James Minnick at the Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies. Dr. Moon, thank you for your comments today. I've been reading last few days from Im Dong-won's book as a Peacemaker. Reminded of how his effort, but of course Kim Dae-jung's effort to be able to seize the control of what was going on with inter-Korean relations, and actually probably made the difference with President Clinton then being able to opportunity. Of course, it didn't last. Up until the Olympics, it looked as if though Korea was only reacting all the time, was not in its own car driving. How does Korea maintain the momentum and the initiative going forward now, given the real concerns that you just your exercises will go on and all these things are likely to cause contention? So how does Korea stay in the...
That is why that I use the term maximum prudence. Yes, we are in the driver's seat, but with the utmost caution. Okay, we don't want to, really offend North Korea. We don't want to offend the United States. We don't want to offend China and all the major actors. Therefore, within that kind of structural constraint, how can we deliver? That is a major task for President Jae-in. That is why he's working really hard, how to find that kind of solution. But in doing that, he realized a very simple fact: cooperation with the United States is essential, without which nothing can be happen. That is why, he has been paying a lot of attention to the American government.
Mark?
Yeah, thank you, Professor. You itemized some items for the U.S. and South Korea as negotiating priorities. But do you have a sense or knowledge of what North Korea's negotiating priorities are among many things they would like to ask for? They would like recognition as a nuclear state. They would like humanitarian assistance. They'd like a lifting of sanctions. They'd like a lessening of pressure on human rights. There's lots of things they would like to have, peace talks. What do they want most in what order?
I don't know, but one thing is very clear. While maintaining nuclear weapons, they want to get American recognition. That is the ultimate goal and most urgent goal. We are aware of it. Therefore, we are trying to find out how to lower North Korean expectation while making North Korea denuclearized. Therefore, if we do not know North Korean intention, we may fall into trap. But we know it, therefore we can avoid it. But North Korea cannot dictate in the way that they want. Okay, therefore North Korea got to face reality too.
We'll take a few more questions before we turn to Dr. Linton, and if there's any other questions that we don't address right now, if there's time at the end, we'll take those questions as well. Dr. Park.
Hi, Key Park, Harvard Medical School. You talked about how South Korea, President Moon Jae-in, hates Korea passing. And I'm just curious about how much the perceived cooperation, sort of uncontested cooperation by the South Korean government to US policies, and how that plays into the sense of Korea passing, and whether or not there's a political will within South Korea to take a firm stance and separate in some ways with with US policies. For instance, the joint military exercises, it's a joint exercise. To what degree does South Korea have the political will to say, no, we won't have the military exercises? Is that politically feasible? And so that's the
key. You're asking a question like a reporter. We have a South Korean journalist here, waiting to hear from me. One way of overcoming Korea passing syndrome is to enhancing into Korean dialogue and cooperation. Now, as a result of resumption of dialogue between North and South Korea, now South Korea is in the position of driver's seat. Okay, but in dealing with the United States does not unilaterally dictate South Korea. They cannot do that, and they know it. There's always consultation. Then look, go back to December, okay? The Pacific Command wanted to continue joint military exercise training as planned. But eventually, through mutual consultation, they were able to delay. Therefore, in other words, even though there is in the military level there is an agreement that one, but the political level they couldn't be changing. Okay? But through mutual consultation. Therefore, I'm telling you that the United States does not dictate South Korea unilaterally. Okay? And there has been constant consultation. We have multiple layers of communication between Seoul and Washington. Then same thing will happen to the joint military exercise and training. Who knows? We have 1 more month to go. During the period of time, there could be change.
Questions in the back. In the back. The lady in the back. Is that Roberta? I can't see. Okay.
Roberta Cohen, Committee for Human Rights in North Korea. I wanted to mention that human rights issues, which were just raised here, include Americans who are in prison in North Korea, as well as South Koreans, include family reunification issues, include North Koreans who defect or escape from the country, and try to raise awareness about prison camps and terrible situations. What is your approach to dealing with these issues? Can you just forget about them? Because I don't think that will happen in the United States. Surely you must have thought about some of these issues. How would you deal with them?
I think we have been urging North Korea to release the 3 detained Korean Americans, and also North Korean defectors are getting equal or even better treatment than the previous conservative government. Okay, and now Minister Tae can meet any foreigners, right? Therefore, there is some kind of misunderstanding. No, South Korea is a democratic country. North Korean defectors are our citizens too. They can voice, they can make their own voices. Okay. Therefore, in other words, I don't see any change in policy. It's a continuing. Okay. Therefore, there might be some kind of fine tuning, but so far, I don't see any big changes.
Last question, gentleman, right
there. Ken Meyercourt. If, as the result of talks with North Korea, South Korea agreed to remove the American troops from South Korea, do you think the Americans would agree to leave?
I don't know. You should know better than I do.
I think not.
No, because there has been so-called speculations of decoupling strategy in order to, since North Korea has a so-called strike capability on the U.S. mainland, in order to get away from the kind of security dilemma, it is better to give up South Korea, okay, and exchanging, okay, North Korea nuclear missile capability striking mainland and South Korean security. But a lot of experts say that it's very unrealistic, okay. And Dr. Henry Kissinger was even suggested that let China handle North Korea, then we will withdraw American troops from South Korea. Yeah, maybe that could have been possible during the Vienna Congress period in Europe, but not today's Northeast Asia.
You didn't have a chance to ask Dr. Moon a question. We may have some time at the end, so just hold on to that. Now we'll turn to Dr. Linton.
I want to first thank the NCNK and Keith. It's a very unique opportunity. I also want to thank Professor Moon, because 3 months ago he approached me. We don't always agree politically on philosophy or thinking, but I think it's been a very useful time in hearing each other speak and also in addressing issues in North Korea. The one thing that came to mind that I thought, to a sideline, I want to, before I jump into healthcare, I want to say is that after the 2000 June summit, the atmosphere in traveling around North Korea was much, much easier. The checkpoints, military, were not checking our passports so vigorously. There was much less intimidated feeling. So I think, it was very useful after Kim Dae-jung and Kim Jong-il were shaking hands. I think this had a huge impact. What I'm trying to say is, on the sideline, there was a lot of negative energy was gone. And so I think a lot of times this very controversial approach to North Korea from our government sometimes is used or, becomes domestically very useful as a negative energy tool, is something that we should be very much more sophisticated in dealing with North Korea. My family's been in Korea over 120 years, and I've been there 29 times. The first time I went to North Korea, after 3 times I became an expert. After 10 times, I started having a few questions, and then after times I was totally lost again. So I would like very much to ask the press, when the videos begin, if they would turn off their cameras, because I have 3 family members that are actively going in and out of North Korea, and it would be I'm going to show some stuff that's very sensitive. So if you could agree to that, I would be you don't have to do it now, but as soon as the film begins, there's one 5-minute video clip, and then I will give you an overview of the whole healthcare system in North Korea. But I would like to concentrate on the solution rather than the problem. Number 1 solution is North Korea should have, from a medical point of view, should have an augmented vaccination program for children and adults to stop. The most obvious thing is to help them with diseases that are stoppable. They have a 방역 위생, so I don't know how to translate it, but it's in charge of vaccinations. It's very effective. Cold chain needs to be made. These are terms that doctors like Dr. Pak from Harvard probably understands better than the most. The second thing is they have the most accessible hospitals in North Korea are the county hospitals. There are over 200 counties, so there's at least 200 plus county hospitals, and that's where the average North Korean, the country is not as urban oriented as South Korea, it's more rural, and those hospitals have very limited ability at diagnosis because they don't have x-rays, up-to-date x-rays, ultrasound, chemistry, and blood count machines. The third is North Korean doctors are very, very skilled. I was involved in building 9 operating rooms, not just in Pyongyang and rural areas, but I was astonished to see, if given the equipment and given the drugs and the sanitary conditions, they're very good surgeons. And they showed me again and again and again that if they can just you put the machinery in their hands, they're very, very good at this, at surgery and doing procedures. The fourth concern maybe comes before everything else is running water and electricity. The constant battle for all of you NGOs out there who work in North Korea. It's a huge issue. And number 5 is, finally, South Koreans are very, very progressive in wanting to have human exchange. But that should be actually the last after they're being supplied with the above 4. I have a printout on this, which I've given, which you can get from Esther later, but it's written down. And then I will give you the conclusion. A good speaker is supposed to give you the conclusion of his talk before he begins, so I'll start with that. Number 1 is, I think in all of this, whether it's humanitarian or whether it's political, that we should start looking at the world through their eyes. What threatens them? And I'm not being sympathetic. My grandfather came into Incheon landing with MacArthur, and my uncle fought in the Chosun River campaign, Changjinu Juntu. So, it's not a matter of that I'm a wild liberal progressive, that to the contrary. But we do need to start looking at the world, how they, whether it's real or not real, their perception of the outside, of the Eastern Bloc being gone, of China becoming so powerful and South Korea so rich. The economy is roughly 1/50th of the South Korean economy. From an economic point of view, it's over, in my opinion. And finally, We should change, and I'm talking to South Koreans, not just Americans, but our approach to North Korea. I think there's assuming attitude that we will be the rulers when there's reunification, that this is a very delicate issue. I think because of all the outside South Korean media and the U.S. computer chip sticks and all of the discs that they get, and they see so much of South Korea, I think they're rather intimidated by South Korea. We in the 70s were very scared of North Korea, but I think the table is turned now, and they're very, very fearful. And after unification, they sincerely worry about what's going to happen to their children, or what is their future if they're absorbed by South Korea. So those are some things and to think about, and for the local people here. Finally, you reporters out there, you did a terrible job in translating engagement. It's just awful the last 20 years. Shame on you. You translated engagement in Korean to embracement, to poyeongjangtae. Come on, engagement is very different from embracement. You're not embracing everything. They need desperately to be engaged. And if Mr. President Trump wants to have a hamburger, I think it's a wonderful idea to engage. And so will you begin the video? This is in a children's hospital several years ago. Some of the films I have are old, some are new, but it really doesn't matter because things don't change a whole lot up there.
And just a reminder for the cameras to be turned off during the video.
I believe our government position is this: despite the nuclear issues, we should go ahead with humanitarian assistance to North Korea. There is our government decided to give $80 million to UNICEF, okay, and will continue. Therefore, humanitarian crisis in North Korea is quite serious. Therefore, we'll go ahead with this humanitarian assistance to North Korea, regardless of nuclear weapons. Of course, if North Korea behave better, then it is good for us.
Okay, Bill Brown, and then I'll ask the last question.
It's a great talk you give. Problem I have is I've heard this for 30, 40 years, ever since I started working on North Korea. Same long story of foreign people going in there. You're certainly not the first. Steve has been going there for a long time. All the NCNK people for 20, 30 years. UN has been in there forever. Clearly there's something wrong other than foreign aid. I mean, there's something must be core to the problem of North Korea. That all this foreign intervention, frankly, is not doing the job, right? I mean, would you agree with that? Or what is the core problem here, that they use beer bottles for IC?
Well, I can speak more directly for tuberculosis. 1965, South Korea had a 5% active TB rate, which was the highest probably in the world after the Korean War. North Korea probably approaches that. We don't have the statistics. After spending over $30 million over a 6-7 year period, all of this aid, you're a little bit wrong on that. The amount of aid that has gone in has been pathetically little. I calculated how much aid that West Germany got from East Germany, and it's 1/65th of what South Korea or the world has given to North Korea. So the amount of aid, I don't know what the recent statistics are, but the amount that we've given, I one time went in with $2 million worth of equipment, and we dropped off mobile X-ray vehicles, Wonsan, Hungnam, Hamung, and then Chung-in, and then Haesan. And I thought I was really, really arrogant. I thought we had a lot of stuff, $2 million. And then on the way back, I realized how pathetically inadequate, and that we ran out, and we didn't even make a mark on their need in 3 provinces. So I was just like very depressed for a long time. But I think we're not dealing with a town. We're not dealing with a province. We're dealing with a whole country. So I think you need to go back and look at how much over that time period that the outside has helped. It's not a whole lot. But on the other side of your question, I do agree with you that we need to look at sustainable. We need to help the North Koreans, help them in ways where they can maintain, and that's the gist of my printout, which you can read, so they can maintain their health system. It's a broken down system. At one point after the Korean War, it worked better than South Korea. So we need to not create a different system right now, but work through their public health. That's the way I think things should be done.
Dr. Linton, I wanted to follow up on the TB question and ask you about the Global Fund. So the Global Fund for HIV, malaria, tuberculosis, one of the largest contributors to eradicate those diseases, recently announced that they were going to stop providing grants to organizations, and Eugene Bell Foundation was one of those organizations. What is the impact of that and sanctions overall going forward?
We made some mistakes with, and for those of you in the room may understand it, may not, but DOTS was a disaster for North Korea in the long run. In the short run, it was very good. It was very, very good. In other words, DOTS is direct observation therapy, DOT. And 6 months, you get a combination of 4 drugs. There's different steps to it. But to make a very long story short, it was very successful. The problem came in North Korea is when multi-drug resistant tuberculosis takes 2 years to treat and costs 100 times, not 10 times, 100 times. Let's say $50 for 6 months treatment. 100 times that, $5,000, is what DOTS, it's not a North Korean thing. Listen very carefully. North Korean doctors, with a patient in the rest home that's not responding to a drug after 6 months or after a year, humanly was unable to discontinue medicine because they don't have secondary and tertiary medication. So what is North Korean rest homes doing? And what is our Global Fund did? It gave them a lot of basic treatment, which actually nurtured and made the problem worse of it created, so their rest homes became multi-drug resistant factories. Do you follow that? So, this TB issue is an issue that KJ Sung out of Harvard and Partners in Health is, I think somebody like him should be put in charge of the whole country, and we need to pool our resources and be more wise at how we do it, because culturally, humanly speaking, and from the heart I understand him, a North Korean doctor, when a certain drug doesn't work, he just won't stop it because the patient is in front of him and the patient loses hope. But actually he's doing a terrible disservice to not just that patient, but also after unification, North and South are going to have this problem. So the single greatest expensive health care or public health thing is going to be tuberculosis after unification, because it is such a chronic problem and it doesn't go away. You have to really work on it years and years and years. Thank you very much.
Please join me in thanking Dr. Linton and Dr. Moon, and thank you so much for coming.